Well, it figures when I try to take a week off, shit hits the fan. I can't control what happens. I'm in the news and commentary business, so of course things are going to happen that are genuinely insane that I need to respond to. But if you were wondering why the videos that have gone up on the channel this week are about everything but the topic you all expect me to cover, that's why. It's because they were recorded weeks in advance and they were just there to feed the algorithm while I'm gone. I planned on returning on Monday, but I can feel a lot of you breathing down my necks. You want me to talk about this now? And that's fine. I wanted to address this because I see individuals in the comment sections speculating about my position or wondering if, I have some sort of a hot take or if I have words of wisdom to help individuals process this. And spoiler alert, I don't, unfortunately. Like all of you, I am just reacting to what I'm seeing and trying to digest the news. And, I feel this overwhelming sense of dread and concern about what's to come. Seeing the video of Charlie Kirk get violently murdered was horrifying, and that was my initial reaction to seeing it, was wishing that I did not just watch this, but also feeling a deep sadness that our political system has devolved into a state of nonstop political violence. And that's unfortunate where we are. A month or so earlier, a prominent Democratic lawmaker in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman, was assassinated. But over the course of the last 2 years, we've watched Palestinians get slaughtered in the most barbaric ways imaginable. Images of Palestinian children being massacred have been burned into my brain forever. But still, I haven't become desensitized to death. And watching Charlie Kirk's death on the internet, it still shocked me, and I wasn't numb to it. And there's something good about that. It's good that we're, as a society, still collectively shocked by violence, because when we start to really grow numb to it, I think that is bad, right? It's really, really bad. You don't want to grow numb to this. Having said that, though, I don't think that if the shoe were on the other foot, Charlie Kirk would have had that same empathy, because he was against empathy, right? If this was done to a leftist, we know how right-wingers would have responded, because we just saw them respond to Melissa Hortman by joking about it. Mike Lee, a sitting lawmaker, was memeing about the assassination of a politician. So I find it deeply hypocritical that these right-wingers are now basically tone policing. That's not really the right word, but trying to incite hatred against leftists and use this as a justification for a broader crackdown against the left and liberals, because you see people online memeing about this. But I think that if they actually do want to bring down the temperature, and I hope that they do, this moment requires introspection, and it requires people to understand that, even though you can not condone violence and condemn violence, which I do, of course. I condemn it and I don't condone it. But even though that's the case, you have to understand that this was the world that Charlie Kirk was cultivating. This is an individual who incited hatred, who espoused white supremacist views, and you can simultaneously be upset that, he died violently, but acknowledge that that doesn't change who he lived as an individual. It doesn't automatically make you a good person in death if you were a bad person while you lived. That's just objectively true for any human being, right? This was somebody who wanted people like me to die. He said that gay people should be stoned to death. And it makes the people who wanted mandated conversion therapy seem sympathetic by comparison, right? Because if you stone somebody, you're burying their body in the sand, their arms, so that way all that's left is their head, and then everybody gets in a circle and throws rocks at them until they die. It's violent, it's gruesome, and that is what this individual said is something that gay people should go through. It was God's perfect law, as he described it. He also said that trans people should be dealt with like they were in the 50s and 60s. Fill in the blanks. What does that mean? So this individual, he said all of these things. He incited violence and hatred against these groups. But I find it gross that there's this expectation that the individuals who were harmed by his rhetoric are supposed to feel sadness for him when that's not how he would feel for any of these individuals if the shoe was on the other foot. Again, I don't think that that justifies his murder. This was not a politician. It was a political commentator. So unlike a CEO of a healthcare company or a politician, he's not directly responsible for the social murders of individuals, directly or indirectly. Having said that, he absolutely cultivated this environment where violence was the norm. He himself said that gun deaths were necessary because that's just the cost of freedom. And I don't know if he would change his position if he were here today, knowing that he would be a victim to this. I mean, I don't know. All we can do is speculate. He's gone now, so he's not going to share his take on that or adjust, right? But like, you have to understand that you can't just like sanitize his image as some liberals like Ezra Klein and Gavin Newsom are trying to do and say he was doing politics the right way. I mean, demonization, rhetoric has violent consequences. And the world that he lived in was, or the world that he wanted to live in, I should say, was one where political violence was the norm, just not of people that looked like him. And again, that's not saying that I condone his violent murder. Again, that made me horrified. It was disgusting to see that, regardless of, what they believed. If I see a human being who is violently assaulted in pain, my human empathy kicks in, and I'm glad that I still have that, right? It doesn't matter who they were. I am thankful that I feel that humanity. And the world that I want, the world that I've been trying to cultivate on this podcast is a world where that sort of thing just doesn't happen. And I think that it's frustrating that, the right is trying to, regardless of like what we know about the individual who was just caught at the time that I record this video, that's breaking news. But like, it's frustrating that the right sees this and they deduce from some people's lack of sympathy online that this is evidence that the left wants the right to die. And that's all the more reason for us to crack down on them. Like, they want to turn this into a Reichstag fire moment. And it's just frustrating because on one hand, you see some say we need to bring the temperature down now, not with Melissa Hortman's assassination, but now that somebody that they really like and respected was assassinated, but they want to bring the temperature down. And then you see others saying, no, we need to turn the temperature up. This is war. And I just like, rather than letting them speculate about what the left wants, let me just tell you what the left wants as a leftist. I want to live in a world where there is no political violence, where there's no violence. I don't think that that's possible, but as little violence as possible. I want to minimize pain and suffering on this planet because I am fundamentally a humanist. I want people to have healthcare. I want people to be able to live their best lives, to spend time with their families, to have the economic ability to travel and have families even. I want people to have good lives, and the same is true for conservatives. My solution to America's problems is not to kill right-wingers or to wish for their deaths. My solution is to give them healthcare and economic stability in hopes that this is going to somehow, get them to stop focusing on marginalized people. I don't want to live in a world where like there's these political assassinations and everybody is waiting on pins and needles to see who did it. So that way that will be used as a justification to crack down on whatever marginalized community that group came from, right? That's deeply, deeply unstable. But unfortunately, I don't think we can actualize this world that I'm talking about because our system simply isn't capable of producing anything but violence, not just, against its own citizens with the police crackdowns in blue states, in DC, in LA and whatnot, but around the world. I mean, just simply withdrawing funding for USAID is going to lead to 14 million deaths in 5 years. Our system is so fucking violence. This is not a new thing for America. Every single week, we are learning about gun deaths in schools. We are watching Palestinians be slaughtered with impunity by a rogue genocidal regime that our government is unconditionally supporting. There is so much violence in this system. And, for some individuals to want to draw the line now, why weren't you saying this to begin with? And I think that people might mistake my views on this because you see my commentary about Henry Kissinger, for example, where it's like, hey, he died. Fuck yeah, fuck him. I think that's different because Henry Kissinger was a politician in power and he directly contributed to the murders of individuals. Social murder is still murder, right? Charlie Kirk did not murder anybody. He contributed to, I think, this violent climate and incited hate. But I think that's different than the actual perpetrators of violence who have the ability to press the button and make the decisions that leads to death and destruction. But even that is not ideal. Like for citizens to, take a little bit of relief in the death of a politician that killed people, that is not ideal. The substitute should be actual justice. These people should be arrested, but our system just constantly subjects human beings to nonstop violence, and the individuals who perpetrate this violence, they are never held accountable. George W. Bush, a war criminal, is being welcomed back with open arms on mainstream media. So the entire system is insanely fucking violent. And I just find it incredibly ironic that there are so many people online who are like creating these witch hunts for people who, are expressing anything but profound sadness at Charlie Kirk's assassination. I don't think anybody wants to live in a country where political assassinations are commonplace. But if you see somebody who's not sympathetic, you have to understand that you don't get to tell them how they can and can't feel. And, the response to this is something that has been not shocking to me, but nonetheless still frustrating because, we saw individuals like Charlie Kirk call George Floyd a scumbag when we all watched him get assassinated on video. So like the sympathy is extremely asymmetric. And, if we're going to have sympathy as a society, I think that individuals have to acknowledge that it can't just be selective. If you see human suffering and death, you shouldn't have a bias. Like you shouldn't wonder, what was the political beliefs of that individual? Because even though I vehemently disagree with every single thing that Charlie Kirk stood for, watching the video of him get violently murdered absolutely triggered the part of my brain that says, oh my God, that's a human being suffering. I don't want to see this. That's bad. But that thing doesn't exist. That mechanism doesn't seem to exist in Republicans. And I find that deeply, deeply frustrating. Another thing that I wanted to address is not only the fact that we live in a deeply violent country, in a system that perpetrates and propagates violence nonstop, but we also see this culture of violence where individuals try to justify and rationalize violence as if it is necessary. And one example that I've seen just personally is, whenever I share my horror at the violence coming out of Gaza being perpetrated by Israel, supported by our government, I see people, primarily conservatives, but also liberals too, tell me, Mike, you shouldn't feel sorry for them because if you were in Gaza, they would throw you off a building because you're a gay man. And a lot of the same people who say that are now saying there's no justification for political violence, which is rich with irony because which is it? For the record, I don't think that it should be a death sentence if you are homophobic. Like Charlie Kirk also wanted to live in a world where gay people were stoned to death, but these people wouldn't think that that justifies his murder, nor should they. But it's just something to think about, right? Where if you have this response to a Palestinian halfway across the globe, but you don't have that same rationalization to an American, you have to explore why that is in your brain. You have to understand that there are biases here that is causing you to rationalize death and destruction if it's people who are seemingly worthy of death and destruction. And I don't think that it is a valuable endeavor to try to ascribe value and moral worth to people's lives. You can judge them accordingly and have the response that you have to it. Nobody can really control that, nor should you try to control people's response. But my plea to individuals in America is that if you actually want to actualize, not to sound too redundant, a society where political violence is not the norm, then you have to understand the ways that you are wittingly and unwittingly contributing to that, and the conservative project is contributing to that. The fear that is permeating through immigrant communities right now, that is violence, right? The fear that is permeating through trans communities right now and other marginalized communities, that is violence. This idea that trans people feel like they're being erased and that people in this country want to kill them. Again, Charlie Kirk said that gay people should be stoned. After the Club Q shooting, conservatives were justifying those deaths because the gay people in question who were murdered were apparently groomers, according to them, even though that's not true. You know, Ron DeSantis decided to get rid of the Pulse nightclub memorial. So conservatives have created this environment where they've made it very clear that they want gay people to die. All of this has fostered this climate where violence is not just rationalized, but sometimes it's celebrated if it's against people that you believe deserve it. And if you don't want that to be the case, if you don't want people to not have empathy when they see, you know, somebody that they don't like get killed, you have to stop contributing to that as well. You know, you see libs of TikTok, you see individuals online talking about how demonic the left is for, you know, joking about Charlie Kirk and his death when they do the same fucking thing. So the hypocrisy absolutely bothers me. Having said that, though, you know, at the end of the day, I think that it is devastating that this is what this country has come to, where political assassinations occur with relative frequency. I've been trying to create a politics of empathy where people don't die needlessly, where we don't spend money on wars while Americans are starving and dying due to a lack of health insurance and sleeping on the streets. But conservatives have been antithetical to that. They've worked against that. Liberals, to some extent, have as well. So I guess that my closing comments on this is, if you don't want political violence, then you actually have to use whatever platform or power you have to work against it. Advocate to hold people who propagate violence politically, social murder and whatnot, accountable. Like, advocate for people to have basic necessities so they don't die needlessly. Actually ascribe value to life that you want to be ascribed to your side, but be consistent. So I'll end by emphasizing again, I do not condone violence and I condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk, but that doesn't mean that we have to obscure the reality of his politics, because his politics fostered political violence. He incited hatred against basically every marginalized community. And even though that does not justify his violent murder, it's something that you have to acknowledge. You can't pretend as if he did not yearn for political violence if you actually want to stop political violence. So I just want everybody to maybe try to do a better job at bringing about the reality that they want, or that they say they want, which is a society free of political violence. But unfortunately, a lot of people want political violence. Their whole politics is about inflicting political violence on people who are powerless, you know, homeless people, immigrants. And so if you genuinely want to stop political violence, you've got to stop advocating for it.